And now we have finally gotten to what would probably be dubbed as the most important aspect of the video, which is the roster of Smash Ultimate. Now, the roster is the most controversial thing in pop culture history. And now, I am selling the prize for the most controversial thing to have ever existed. And the bid starts at 500. Do I hear 500? Going once. 500. Oh, I hear in the back 500 by Nickelback. 600. Anybody else? 600 by The Door from Titanic. Anyone else? 1,000 by Star Fox Adventures. Going once. Going twice. Oh, I hear another one. 1,500 by the roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Going once. Going twice. Sold to the roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I guarantee you people are probably watching this video thinking about, oh, what's this guy's opinions on the roster, since he apparently likes trashing on certain things and raving about other things. So yes, I am finally getting around to the roster. Let's dive right into it. The roster of Smash Ultimate is the best roster in any video game ever made. I will say that out loud, but that doesn't mean that it's flawless. It has a lot of flaws, just like the stages, and some of it even dives down to the basics of how it's set up, because unlike other Smash Bros. Games, this setup is interesting, because the first Super Smash Bros. Game, it was just set up in, well, it was pretty random actually. It was just set up in order by, I guess, how popular the game was or something. I don't really know how the original was set up, because it just goes down the line of just Mario, Donkey Kong, Link, Samus, Yoshi, Kirby, Fox, Pikachu, and then the other 4 that you unlock just go on either sides of each bar. And it's like, whatever. Now, Melee's is the one that gets pretty weird. I will say it did change the setup of the roster into a pretty more set in order kind of fashion, because it goes down the line of all the Mario characters first, then they just have Donkey Kong, then they have Captain Falcon, and then they have the Star Fox characters on the second row, then they have Ness, Ice Climbers, Kirby, Samus, and then they have the Zelda characters, and then on the bottom they have the Pokemon characters, Mr. Game & Watch, and Marth. And now, this is the game they introduced Echo Fighters in, so they put the Echo Fighter next to the character that they're an Echo Fighter of. So Dr. Mario's next to Mario, Falco's next to Fox, Pichu's next to Pikachu, Roy's next to Marth, Young Link's next to Link, and Ganondorf's next to Captain Falcon. Now you're probably thinking, Ganondorf next to Captain Falcon? That makes no flipping sense. How in the world is a Zelda character an Echo Fighter of a flipping F-Zero character? Well, first of all, Captain Falcon has no moveset potential from F-Zero at all, so his whole moveset is completely BS'd in the game, and while his moveset is probably one of the coolest movesets, Falcon Punch! It's made up. It doesn't exist, whatever. And apparently they thought it was, oh, instead of using Ganondorf's potential from his final boss fight from Ocarina of Time, let's just copy and paste Captain Falcon's moveset because we're lazy. So yeah, that is basically what happened in Melee, and it's alright. The setup's alright. It works. And then in Brawl's setup, Brawl is actually one of the most interesting setups I've ever seen in any fighting game ever made, because Brawl has it set up where instead of having it going in a horizontal fashion, it goes in a vertical fashion. So the first column are the Mario characters, the second column is Donkey Kong characters plus Yoshi and Wario to finish off the Mario characters, the next row is all Zelda characters, the next row after that is Samus, Pit, Ice Climbers, and Rob, then the next row after that is the Kirby characters plus Olimar, then the row after that is the Star Fox characters plus Captain Falcon, and then the next row after that is the Pokemon characters, and then the row after that is the Fire Emblem and Earthbound characters, and then the final column is Mr. Game & Watch, Solid Snake, and Sonic. Now, I actually think this is a really good setup because of how unique it is, because most fighting games always go left and right. This one decided to go up and down, and I think that's really cool. And I will say that there's really no problems with the setup of this roster at all, because it actually works really well. It isn't until Smash 3DS when things just get a little stupid, because in Smash 3DS, they have it set up in like a really weird manner where it goes back to being horizontal just like always, and it starts out with all the Mario characters up to even Wario, and then they just randomly have Mr. Game & Watch at the end, which I guess is fine, and then they have the Donkey Kong characters, but then instead of giving Zelda its own start of a row, they put it in the middle of a row for some reason. So then it goes Zelda characters, and then it goes Metroid characters, then Kid Icarus for some reason gets to be the start of a row, then Fire Emblem, then Kirby, Little Mac at the very end, Star Fox towards the bottom, then all of Pokemon. Again, what? Like, I would have totally expected Pokemon to be the start of a row, but like, okay. Then Duck Hunt and Robber at the end of that row, and then Ness, Captain Falcon, Villager, Olimar, and Wii Fit Trainer are all there on the second to last row, and then Dr. Mario, Dark Pit, and Lucina are the 3 Echo Fighters, so they're just jumbled up together for some reason, and then Shulk, Pac-Man, Mega Man, and Sonic are at the bottom, and then all the DLC characters get a separate page because you know how teeny tiny the flipping 3DS screen is. So you basically have to click like, oh, go to next page to see the rest of the roster. So this is the only one where I'd have to literally show it in 2 different pieces because the roster can't all be shown all at once. So the 3DS roster, I will say, is set up the worst out of any other Smash game just because it's on the 3DS, but it is set up okay. I mean, this is definitely where they start to truly show the Echo Fighters again, because back in Brawl, they like separated the Echo Fighters to the point where it's like you don't know who's an Echo Fighter even though they technically were still Echo Fighters, and this is the first game that they're basically saying that Roy and Falco are not Echo Fighters anymore, which is stupid because they're basically still Echo Fighters. I don't understand why they keep trying to change up the Echo Fighters across Smash history. Now, the thing with Smash 3DS is that its roster is actually not set up the same as Smash Wii U's. Smash Wii U's, I'll say it's actually even stupider actually, because it starts off with Mario characters, and then obviously goes Wario, and then Donkey Kong, so basically all Mario characters on the top row. Easy, makes perfect sense. Then Mr. Game & Watch, then Little Mac, and then for some reason they start Zelda off on the first row just to cut it off to go to the second row. I think that looks so sloppy. They should have just put Zelda on the bottom row and then put someone else at the top row. I mean, come on. Like, they should have put Kid Icarus on the top row to be those 2 slots, because after the Zelda finishes off on the second row, it goes Metroid, then Kid Icarus, and then Fire Emblem, and then Duck Hunt, then Kirby. Next row is Star Fox, Pokemon, Rob, Ness, Captain Falcon, Villager, Olimar, Wii Fit Trainer, Shulk, and then you have the 3 Echo Fighters, Dr. Mario, Dark Pit, Lucina, Pac-Man, Mega Man, Sonic, so third-party characters, and then DLC characters, Mewtwo, Lucas, Roy, Ryu, Cloud, Corrin, Bayonetta. Now, this one is set up super similar to 3DS, it's just different in the sense that it actually gets a full TV screen and not a teeny tiny little itty-bitty 3DS screen. So, in a sense, the setup for Smash 4 as a whole is just really sloppy, honestly, because both iterations of it are just not set up that good, and this is where I come back to Smash Ultimate. Smash Ultimate's roster is set up in an interesting way because they actually put it in order by when the character was added to Smash. At least that's what they were trying to do. Because starting with Mario all the way down to Jigglypuff is the Smash 64 characters, except for Dark Samus. Peach all the way to Mr. Game & Watch is the Super Smash Bros. Melee characters, except for Daisy, Lucina, and Chrom. Meta Knight all the way down to Wolf are the Smash Brawl characters, except for Dark Pit. Villager all the way down to Bayonetta are all the Smash 4 characters, except for Ken. And then Inkling all the way through Sora are all Smash Ultimate characters. And then they have the Mii's at the end because I guess they just didn't feel like putting them in the Smash 4 selection because they technically had the same thing in Smash 4 with the Mii's just being at the end. And it's like, I get it because they're the make your own characters, but I feel like they should have been put in the actual slot when they were added to the roster, which is like somewhere before Bowser Jr., but like after Greninja, I think. And it's messed up because of the Echo Fighters, because the Echo Fighters screw it up by they actually felt like it was necessary to put them next to the character they're being Echo Fighter of. Like, I feel like some of them are just so obvious who they're being an Echo Fighter of because of the fact that they have almost the same moveset. So I feel like it's not necessary to have them next to each other. And plus, there's already an option in Smash to put the Echo Fighters stacked over the character that they're an Echo Fighter of, basically reducing the size of the roster. So I feel like it makes sense why they did it, but like it just kind of defeats the whole purpose of the roster setup, where it's supposed to be in order from Smash 64 to Smash Ultimate. And now that you have these Echo Fighters all split across the roster, like Dark Samus should not be in with the 64 characters. Dark Samus should literally be like right after Inkling. Like, some of these characters are just in such wrong places. Like, if I were to put all the characters back in the right places, it'd look like a completely different roster just because of how screwed up the Echo Fighters messed up the way the roster looks. And that's just the way the roster looks, because another whole problem with the roster is just the Echo Fighters in general. general. Because the Echo Fighters, it's like, what do you define an Echo Fighter of? Echo Fighters are supposed to be characters who have a similar moveset to someone else who's already on the roster. Now, all the Echo Fighters in Smash will include Dark Samus, Daisy, Lucina, Trom, Dark Pit, Pen, and Richter. Now, that's a lot of Echo Fighters, but the only issue I have with the Echo Fighters is that they make no sense with which ones are Echo Fighters and which ones aren't, because I've already mentioned it before with Falco that he should be an Echo Fighter, but for some reason, according to this roster, he's not an Echo Fighter. And it's like, really? He's just like Ken. I've already mentioned this. He has almost the same moveset as Fox, so therefore he should be an Echo Fighter of Fox. But for some reason, they're just considering him not an Echo Fighter, and Ken is. And then that's the stupid part, is like, why is Ken and Ryu, like, why does Ken fall under the Echo Fighter umbrella where he does pretty much fit the description I just said, but other characters like Daisy and Peach and Richter and Simon and Lucina and Marth, where they're pretty much the exact same character. There is almost no difference other than the way the character looks. And it's so sloppy because that's not an Echo Fighter character, that's a clone. It's a copy and paste, 100%. The only difference is just how the character looks. Take, for instance, it's basically Marth going trick-or-treat as Lucina. That's basically how it is. The Echo Fighters are just so sloppy on the roster. I don't understand why they don't know what an Echo Fighter is. And it's alright because the concept of the Echo Fighter is cool because it gives them the opportunity to reuse characters' movesets, and I love that it's in the game. It's just I just really hate how it's executed in the game because it's so sloppy with how some characters are clones and others are actually Echo Fighters. But for the most part, Echo Fighters, they're just Echo Fighters. I mean, there's not much else to say about it. Like, Echo Fighters are just as sloppy as Hard Rock Cafe commercials. Like, it's like Hard Rock Cafe doesn't even know what hard rock is. They literally try to play every other genre of music other than hard rock. That's like what Echo Fighters are. So sloppy, it makes you wonder why they're even doing it in the first place. Now, it's not just Echo Fighters either. The actual movesets for some of the characters are pretty sloppy because they're just kind of poor and don't resemble the character's game that well. Some characters like Captain Falcon, I'll give you a pass because, like, what are you supposed to do? He's from a racing game. What's he supposed to do? Just race around the stage and just like no, you can't do that as a moveset. That's ridiculous. So Captain Falcon, I'll give you a pass. Whereas with other characters like Fox, I already mentioned the Star Fox Assault Artillery before. I don't understand why it's not in the game. It seems like such an obvious thing to put in his moveset. And then Link, they didn't actually change, even though Link is literally wearing his champion's tunic from Breath of the Wild and he looks like Link ripped straight out of Breath of the Wild, that's not actually Link from Breath of the Wild. He still has almost the exact same moveset as Link pre-Breath of the Wild. So he just has Ocarina of Time Link's moveset. He just looks like Breath of the Wild. And same thing with basically every other Smash 64 character. Samus, Mario, Donkey Kong, Kirby, Yoshi, Pikachu, blah blah blah. They all have almost the exact same moveset that they had from when they were first introduced in Super Smash Bros. And that is super lame because that's basically Nintendo being too afraid to change the moveset because they're afraid of backlash. It's like, really guys, come on, you could have just taken a small little leap of faith and did something really cool and everyone would forget about their old moveset. I don't understand that logic where you're like too afraid to change the moveset because you don't want the fans to backlash. It's like, really? I get it, the fans are the ones buying the game, but at the same time, they're not the ones who tell you what to do, because so many of these characters who didn't really have a whole lot of moveset to work with back in Smash 64, they've had a lot more games since then. Like, take Fox for instance. Star Fox Assault is not the only Star Fox game that's come out since Melee. I mean, back in Melee, Star Fox 64 and the original Star Fox were the only two Star Fox games out at the time. Here we are, Smash Ultimate, and we have Star Fox 64, Star Fox Adventures, Star Fox Assault, Star Fox Command, Star Fox Zero, Star Fox 64 3D, and even Star Fox 2, which was a canceled game that they re-released on Nintendo Switch Online, was released. There's so much to work with, even though not really, because Adventures and Assault are really the only two that have Fox like running around on the ground with guns or whatever kind of weapon, and it's stuff like that. Like, I just proved that so many games came from Star Fox, such a niche franchise, so you can assume that other characters like Link have had probably over 15 games come out since like Melee, so he should have had some kind of moveset change. changed, right? No, he's still the same dude, just looks like Breath of the Wild. So some of the older Smash characters have that issue with, like, they're basically still the same character. They didn't really add anything. I mean, even with Mario, because, like, sure, they added Cappy for one of his taunts, right? That must mean they changed his... No, they didn't. Now, Mario's not as bad because in Smash Brawl, they actually did add Flood from Super Mario Sunshine into his moveset, so they actually did start trying to change certain movesets, because they did the same thing with Luigi. They did end up adding the Poltergust or whatever it's called from Luigi's Mansion in there, and it's like, yeah, why couldn't you do that with other characters? Like, don't pander to just the Mario characters. You should be doing this with all the characters who end up getting, like, cool, drastic different moves in other franchises. And it's not just the Smash 64 characters. I mean, another main issue with the Smash roster is the third-party characters. Now, there's nothing really inherently wrong with the third-party characters, because how could you complain about third-party characters? Nintendo does all that hard work and effort to get the contract with that company to put the character in the game, and it's like, yes, I can understand that, but the fact that they were so sloppy with certain ones, I mean, I'm about to do it again. I already did it before, but I'm about to trash on Sonic. Sonic has probably one of the worst movesets in all of Smash history, just because, I mean, look at him. Let's see. Ball, 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 ball again, and it's like, really, you couldn't just make him have a Sonic moveset? Like, Sonic has probably one of the most potential out of any other character in the roster, because of the fact that he's Sonic the flipping Hedgehog. He has so many video games and so many different moves and stuff from different Sonic games, and this is the best Nintendo could do? Are you kidding me right now? This is ridiculous. He shouldn't have a moveset where it's basically the same move over and over and over again. Like, again, I truly think that Nintendo still has something against Sega. And then this is where I dive back to Echo Fighters. Richter is one of only 2 Echo Fighters who are actually third-party characters, and Richter was the very first character to be added that was the second character from a third-party franchise in Smash, because before Richter, every third-party franchise only had one character on the roster, and then they added Richter, basically opening the door to saying, hey guys, we're willing to add more than one character to certain franchises. But for some reason, they still only have one Sonic character and have 2 Castlevania characters, 2 Street Fighter characters, and oh my goodness, 2 Final Fantasy characters. This is ridiculous. How did we get those franchises I just mentioned with a second character first before Sonic? So yeah, now it just looks super weird that we have 2 Castlevania characters. Sonic the Hedgehog is a way bigger franchise than Castlevania and Street Fighter. Like, what? So there's that issue. And it's not just the third-party representation in the roster, it's also the third-party representation elsewhere in the game. Because in World of Light, they actually have a Monster Hunter themed area, and there's also a Monster Hunter boss fight where you fight Rathalos, and it's like, so there must be a Monster Hunter character in the game, right? No. Absolutely not. There is no Monster Hunter character on the roster whatsoever. It looks like an unfinished project or something. Like, they put Monster Hunter in the game where it has its own area, it has its own boss fight with a boss fight stage that you obviously can't play on the roster, but they go all out to do all this Monster Hunter everything in the game. I mean, Rathalos even is an assist trophy in the game. So why'd they go all out to go ask Capcom, hey guys, can we put Monster Hunter in the game? They say yes. They put Monster Hunter in the game, but don't put the Monster Hunter on the roster. Like, that's who really should have been put on the roster other than Richter. Because even amongst Castlevania fans, Alucard, who was added as an assist trophy, is way more of a main character and more well known than Richter. So really, they only cheesed Richter into the roster just to have him on the roster. He's one of those characters where if he was never added, no one would ask for him. And it's the same thing, because, like, I've mentioned this before, there's so many characters on the roster that they've added over the years that if they never added them on the roster, absolutely no one would ask for them. I guarantee you 100%. Pichu, Dr. Mario, Richter, Rob, Ice Climbers, and Jigglypuff. No one would ever ask for any of those characters had they never been added. And while some of them have really cool movesets, some of them are just kind of because this is where it dives into the lesser known characters on the roster and or just characters who literally only have one game, so the retro characters. So these retro picks would include Ice Climbers, Mr. Game & Watch, Rob, Duck Hunt, Little Mac, and technically we can count Wii Fit Ultimate Trainer because of how the Wii at this point in time is almost 20 years old. So now these retro picks are only added in the roster because at one point in time their game was like super hype, super popular, super dope. Like, these games were popular at one point in time, and then all of a sudden they just kind of died. They have a point to being in the roster, but certain ones just should not be in the game, like Ice Climbers, for example. While the game did sell really good for the NES standards, compared to Duck Hunt, it's kind of sad. I don't understand how we got Ice Climbers and Flipping Melee back in 2001 first, and then it took until Smash 3DS 2014, over a decade later, before we got Duck Hunt, which was, by the way, drastically sold way better than Ice Climbers. Practically sold like 20 times better than Ice Climbers. Like, how did we get Ice Climbers before Duck Hunt? That makes no sense. And that's just the retro characters. And then last, the setup of the DLC characters. Now, this is actually only the second Smash game to have DLC, technically 3 if you count 3DS and Wii U separately. But the setup for DLC characters actually makes perfect sense in Ultimate because it's in order by when they were added to Smash. So literally, all they have to do when they add a DLC character is just slap them at the end of the roster. Whereas in Smash 4, they did it in kind of a sloppy way. I mean, had they done it the right way, it probably would have looked just fine, because Ryu, Cloud, and Bayonetta being third party, they could have easily just slapped them at the end of the roster, because in Smash Wii U and Smash 3DS, the third party characters were slapped at the end of the roster. But because Mewtwo, Lucas, Roy, and Corrin were all added to the roster, of which are obviously Nintendo characters, they were slapped at the end of the roster too. So now it looks super weird having these third party characters, Pac-Man, Mega Man, Sonic, and then going back to first party, Mewtwo, Lucas, Roy, then going back to third party, Ryu, Cloud, and then going back to first party again, Corrin, and then going back to third party again, Bayonetta, and now it just looks super weird. So if it was set up correctly, Mewtwo should have been put like probably right after Charizard, but right before Lucario. Lucas should have been put like literally right after Ness. Roy should have been put right after Marth, and Corrin should have been put right after Robin. Now, the setup of Smash 4 in the DLC aspect was really stupid, whereas the setup for DLC in Smash Ultimate is actually genius because it makes perfect sense. And that is basically the whole entire census of how the roster is set up. And the movesets, while I didn't really go too in depth in the movesets because the movesets are honestly just fine for some of them, the only movesets that are really botched are Echo Fighter movesets, and it's alright. It's a really good roster. I'd give that an easy A tier for a roster setup, but in the census of just being the roster as a whole, easy triple S+. That is still the best roster in all of Super Smash Bros. History.